Larry and Rob are here, as you can see. So yeah, and Rob actually skipped dinner to be here. And yeah, we had a lot of fun. I think the last 15 months, and a little less sleep and a little less laziness and comfort, because we're all so excited about what we've been creating. The last time we had a podcast, you asked me, okay, can you tell me how our first meeting, how did that went? And I thought, well, maybe it would be cool to ask you, how did it go for you? Like, because that was 25 years ago, I was like this big. How did you how did you see me?
Yeah,
how did you experience that?
I can tell that story, but I believe it was a CBT conference, was it not?
Yeah.
And it was very early on, because this is 25 years ago. And so some of the stuff that you are all comfortable with now, and it's so much out there in the water. I mean, the acceptance, mindfulness, values, context, not content, all of that. Yeah, 25 years ago, it was none of that. I mean, and CBT and behavior therapy became CBT, and I'm old enough to remember and be part of that. I mean, you're looking at somebody who had long conversations with B.F. Skinner and Joe Volpe and Leo Reyna and, you name it. And in the Netherlands, with people like Hubert de May, who was kind of behavior analytically oriented guy, still around, still alive, still kicking. And, but, good functional analytic, hardcore.
Yes.
And I don't know who invited me. I think it was Hubert must have been invited me to the CBT conference. Yeah. But I can picture the room. It was a big room, and it was filled with people. And I was going to get up and, talk about ACT before there was even the first ACT book.
Yeah.
There was no book. So, if you wanted to be trained in ACT, there was no webinars, there was no online, there was no book. We hadn't even started a listserv. We kind of shared, mimeographed. We had Xerox machines, but we shared copies of individual articles and protocols. But I have to say the reception at the conference was actually surprisingly good. I remember being afraid. You're looking at a panic disorder person in recovery. And 25 years ago, that was much more present for me than it is now, just personally. But I was also excited to be there and loving the interactions with Hubert. And he had this little puppy following him around. This human puppy who was very kind of bouncy, but also a little shy, but kind of, but wanting to talk and talking very intelligently about ACT and behavioral thinking and contextual thinking and all of that. And it was this dude, Gijs Jansen. So that's the beginning of the journey. We've been in communication periodically ever since.
Yeah.
Lo and behold, Gijs becomes what he's become in the Netherlands. A very, very important part of the whole ACT community, but just the evidence-based therapy, the third wave CBT, the whole thing that's happened in our culture worldwide. And so somewhere in here we should talk about what happened with you reaching out and with ACT Guide and all of that. We'll tell that story, but that's where it started. And I still have photos of that first session. And I can picture the room very, very well. I standing in the back of the room with all those seats in that big crowd and having our conversations long, long ago.
Yeah, they weren't cognitive behavioral therapists. They were cognitive therapists. So that was a room full of people who just didn't understand what you were doing. But I remember they were all intrigued. I think that's a good word. Because you stood there, and I remember you're talking about your own fear and talking about having panic attacks and talking about how you try to resolve that, and that it didn't work, and that you had to find something else. And that was like a taboo that in that time to talk about your own weaknesses or to talk about complaints, because we're therapists. We should be complaint free because we know it all. And that blew me away, and I knew it before because we had been emailing for a year before then already. It was 99, 2000, I think, and I thought I got to meet this fucking guy, and then I met him, and then he just did the same, and I thought, well, if he can be vulnerable, if he can have fear and do it anyway, if he can have like a panic attack and speak in front of 700 people, then maybe that's a possibility, you know. So that's what you were for me. I think a very genuine human possibility.
Well, here, and I do want to say one thing here about the Dutch, and it's always dangerous to talk about people that, you know, the reception there of speaking that way was very resonant. I mean, people were very welcoming. They were very kind, and also willing to talk at that level. Not necessarily that they would want to do it themselves, but they I didn't feel judged.
Yeah.
And I expected it to be a hard go, because in some areas of the world it is, you know, even today, you know. But I have to say, you know, I mean, I have always kind of stayed not inside, but linked to the CBT community because of their commitment to data and to a progressive tradition. And because I know that the behavioral roots are there. And I sent my first PhD, Rob Settle, to study with Aaron Beck, you know, on an internship. And we did the first randomized trial of ACT with help of Aaron Beck next door to the Center for Cognitive Therapy in Philadelphia. This was before Aaron Beck was cool. I mean, I'm that old. And, you know, you know, he's dead now, but he was always a friend and always kind to me. So I never bought into this idea that the cognitive therapists were the enemy or the CBT was the enemy. But I did think and here I'll get into an old man's rant if you allow me. Don't encourage me. Let me just say it that way. My children know. I just had Father's Day here, and I got them all in, and I've got kids from 17.
Wednesday. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. It was Father's Day in the U.S. And one gift I asked for is I wanted my 4 rascals to pile in for a Zoom meeting, and I said, but I get to do my rants on Tesla, and on Trump, and you can't object. So,
you have that thing where you stand on when you do that, or?
Yeah, a soapbox. But yeah, anyway, there never was a war, and the CBT community because of its respect for data and so forth, carries some of the behavioral tradition, functional analysis that was always in there. Yeah. We did get into the DSM era, and we prospered because of randomized trials for top-down normative categories, and now we're trying to crawl our way out of that because everybody realizes it's empty and it's not been helpful to us really in creating a progressive thing that reaches the human need that's out there. But I really, back to what I was trying to say about the Netherlands, is that you have such a tradition there inside now what's become that community. But you have people like, you know, like Paul Emmelkamp, you know, like an old curmudgeon, you know, but it was such a wonderful, open, you know, and like Paul has done some work with, let's see if ACT works. I don't doubt if it does. It's a bunch of hippie stuff. Rah, rah, rah. Well, he actually got to me and said, I know what you're doing. It's just hippie stuff. But he tested it. And he did a meta-analysis. And he's written, with Jack, some very nice, fair, hard-hitting, but fair, so the Netherlands have been really, really supportive within the ACT community, but also, Spinhoven's work, looking at longitudinal things, what happens with psychological flexibility. That's the Netherlands. The Netherlands have really been an important part of the CBT community historically, behavior therapy community historically. And now I think the third wave and ACT. So that was a longer rant than I meant it, but the reception I got at that CBT conference, which was nowhere near as kind as some other ones around the same time, really has been foretold what has unfolded and produced the group I'm talking to right now.
Yeah, sure. So what in the core, I had a few questions about happiness, but I think on this trail, what in the core for you is the most important thing about what you're doing here with yourself, but also with clients? Can you define that? Because we have psychological flexibility, we can read the books, but how would you?
Oh, well, what is, if you look at this and like, what is in the ACT therapeutic relationship? What is in an ACT approach? What defines it? And you actually started out a little bit by pointing out to this issue of shared vulnerabilities and values, that are even in the way that we train ACT or how we talk about ACT and so forth. We don't do it from up here to people who are down here.
Yeah.
We create a horizontal relationship with other human beings where, yes, we have some science, we have some expertise, but we also, good ACT therapists are applying these ideas to their own lives. I've actually not met a really good ACT therapist who wants to only do it from up here, to metaphorically put on the white coat, hang on to the clipboard and tell people what to do. No, these concepts penetrate your heart, they penetrate your head, and you learned how to work with them with your hands, metaphorically, with the skills that you have. And to have the kind of support that ACT Guide gives you. And now the new version that we're going to try to put around the world, and even the plugin that we'll talk about. But so what's important? I think what's important, even before you get to the psychological flexibility model, is can we treat each other as human beings and connect in consciousness around an issue of how do we empower the life journey of whole human beings, where you never, ever buy into the idea that people are broken, that your job is to repair them and put them back together,
fix them,
that you get to go up here as the one who's untouched by these things. But you start and remain as part of a human community, a culture that's evolving over many hundreds of years that is trying to learn how to manage these wonderful tools of language and cognition that we, the crazy human species, somehow created. That has meant that we all know that we're going to die. We all know that eventually the sun will be a red dwarf and the earth will be spinning around inside the sun. That as I wear on my little bracelet, whenever I give a talk, engraved in Hebrew, it says, this too shall pass. I mean,
I love that line. I actually love that line. Yeah.
How can we live our lives whole and free and manage this tiger that we're on of human language and cognition with all the wonderful things it produces, like the ability for me to talk to you in real time across several thousand miles of space that even 10 years ago or 15 years ago would be unheard of.
Yeah.
Never mind the apps we can give to clients and the chat GPTs and all the rest that are coming thundering down upon us. So that's what's most important, is a human relationship in consciousness where we focus on what empowers the journey of individual people. And when you focus that way, here's what we see. We see the artists have been doing that from the beginning. The musicians have been doing that from the beginning. The great literature, the great films, the poems, and yes, the therapists. And what we can bring inside special qualities of a therapeutic relationship, that creation, which is pretty cool, we can also bring behavioral science. We can bring evidence-based processes that are linked to evidence-based methods and kernels that empower the journeys of individual human lives. And when I say individual, I mean also the couples and families and communities and organizations and teams and work groups and clinics and nations and the world. You know, that what we're working on isn't just the isolated individual, but whatever level. I think one of the things that means, just for ACT people, if you're not understanding what we're trying to do with the process-based approach, look deeply in what you like about ACT and put into behavioral science. That's what that is.
Yeah.
It's what's been in ACT from the beginning, which is what are the smallest set of high precision, high scope things we can target to do the most good for the most people in the most contexts. You know, and psychological flexibility comes out of that. Relational frame theory comes out of that. I think the work that we're doing on cooperation, attachment, shared values comes out of that. The process-based model comes out of that. And now I'll finish my rant. You ask a single question, you get a 15-minute answer. Sorry.
I'm just so used
I'm
to
an
it
old
now.
I'm in a chair that rocks. You realize that.
I'm just so used to it.
Yeah,
It's fine. It's very interesting. So yeah, we've got.
Well, the other shoe that hasn't really hit the ground, process-based, is hitting the ground. This kind of holistic focus on individuals hitting the ground. What hasn't fully yet hit the ground is, what if even our diagnostic system, if our care systems, if our funding systems, if our health systems could view people as whole people, where you don't have to come up with some artificial, normative, latent disease category that never somehow tells you where it came from or what to do about it. There's not a single DSM diagnosis, not one ever, where we know where it comes from, how it develops over time, and what are the processes that do that, and how to intervene and why it works in terms of processes. So we don't have any diseases that are psychiatric diseases. We don't have syndromes, which are a way to get to these functional units. We never got there. But in the behavior therapy tradition, in the CBT tradition, we did. What are the processes that move people?
Yeah.
How do they show up in a person's life? Early on, that was reinforcement, stimulus control, and so forth. Very important, still useful. Now we've got emotion science, cognitive science, all the rest. But the other shoe to hit the ground is our data analytic and conceptual systems have to catch up with that.
So you're actually saying psychological diseases scientifically don't exist?
They don't. Well, I'm not saying that. Go look at the American, the DSM-V work group, academic psychiatry. That's what that is in the US of A. And word for word, it says there's not a single psychiatric disease that emerged out of syndromes. There are no specific and sensitive biomarkers. I mean, they say it in sentences that you go, oh, really? Yeah, really. Well, then what are we using it for? Well,
what are we doing?
What are we doing? We're using it to label people and manage healthcare systems, but we don't need the labels, especially when they're ill-fitting suits. And we can manage the healthcare system, I think, by focusing on processes that empower people, not just in the mental health area, but also the behavioral health area, because you're going to have challenges, physical disease, you got issues like diet, sleep, exercise, and in social wellness. How are we doing a good job if we're just focusing on OCD and we're letting run rampant, prejudice and stigma towards other human beings, which we know infects the human heart and hurts people that stigmatize, but also is the source of many of those syndromes when you're on the enacted stigma end, not by accident. The poor people or gay people or minorities, or you name it, are the ones that end up with the most mental health problems. So time's up. Whole people, processes that empower, categories that focus you on that, and even statistics that tell you, that don't lie to you as a practitioner. I probably won't do that rant, but boy, we're doing things now in the labs, and I'm so excited for what's coming, but also thinking, oh my goodness, when people realize that all of our statistics have been lying to us, I think there's going to be some mad clinicians out there.
You're building the bridge yourself to the mind grapher, so I'm just going to leave this whole thing with the happiness thing. I do want to know one thing though, because that's just a personal question. What's the whole thing? I mean, you had a quote. I said, if Gandhi would have said that, love isn't everything, it's the only thing, right? What if Gandhi would have said that? That would have been, that would probably have topped the I have a dream speech, probably, if he would have said that. But it's such a beautiful quote, and just a little thing about that. What's the feeling behind that? Can you say what you personally mean by that?
Yeah. Well, if you take a contextual view and you kind of focus on something and you look at the larger context, the larger context, the larger context, the larger context, you hit a space, and I talked about this actually in my TEDx talk when I talk about my personal journey, where you realize that, what is a way of thinking about this contextual approach that allows you to look at your thoughts with a little bit of sense of with equanimity and a little bit of separation of you, the conscious person, and the thoughts that you have, to look at your emotions, but learn from them and being able to go into them, but without being overwhelmed and having to run from them or cling to them. I want my happiness, don't go away. What is it like to be able to come in to the present moment in a way that allows you to allocate attention in a way that's flexible, fluid, and voluntary, from this kind of more witnessing or noticing sense of self, and to focus on your values and get your feet moving in that direction? I've just said the psychological flexibility model, right? Yeah. And then bring it into your relationships and take care of your body in a way that affords you, allows you to be the best you can be. Well, a really good word for that is to take a loving stance with yourself. I mean, look, if you had a crying child coming to you talking about her fears, and if you got down at her level and you said, tell me what that's like, or gave her a hug or something, you'd be doing something loving, wouldn't you? If you had somebody talking about their cognitive worries and entanglement, you did the same thing, you'd be doing something loving. Well, so what I'm saying is,
it's like greasing the wheels of psychological flexibility, maybe, that you need.
Exactly, that there's a space we can get where the context of all contexts, that goes beyond words, that is simply affords the ability to be open, aware, and actively engaged in a life worth living. And not even just for the human species, the same thing that allows you to care about whether or not the elephants are going to die, or whether or not we're going to so trash the planet, that entire ecosystems are going to be destroyed. The young people get it. I think thinking people get it. Yeah. What if we took a more loving stance to creation? Our spiritual traditions get it. If you had to distill down the best of all of our spiritual traditions, our wisdom traditions, our religious traditions, and I'm not doing this in a theistic way particularly, but if you had to distill it down, you could do a lot worse than saying it means taking a loving stance with yourself and others and all of God's creation, if you're talking in a theistic way, right? So that it matters, that whether or not we, no longer have elephants on the planet, or it matters whether or not there are starving people in Bangladesh, or it matters whether or not the bombs are falling in the Ukraine.
So what you're saying now is that sadness is maybe also love in disguise?
Yeah. Isn't it? I say to people, don't be thinking, and we have some data where this is back to the idiomatic analysis and why it matters. Don't be thinking that this kind of mindfulness, self-compassion thing is all about self-soothing.
Yeah.
I say this ought to come with a warning label.
Yes.
Because when you put this into your heart, and then you go to the grocery store and you see that old person pushing the cart who's struggling to make her legs move to push it, and there's nobody who can buy groceries for her.
Yeah.
She's buying them herself. And then she's got a handwritten note there, and she's looking at the cans. And it's because she's deciding what she can afford.
You're killing me already.
You with me on this?
Yeah.
You open your eyes, you look around, you're like, wow, so much suffering in the world. But then I look at what we're doing as a community, in the ACT community. Do you know that the single most downloaded document in the entire World Health Organization website is an ACT self-help book?
Yeah.
And that's there because of people like you, Gijs. It's because of some of these heroes I was talking about who are in the Netherlands, but not just there, around the world. So that, when the World Health Organization said, we have to be dealing with the victims of war, and, we have people flowing into Uganda from the South Sudan with nothing but their lives, having been raped on the way, and their children, having to watch their father being chopped with a machete.
Yeah, the worst.
Just flat out, and some of the groups there that are very active there, by the way, are funded by charity from the Netherlands and have home offices in the Netherlands. War Child, some of these, people have heart for these things. And the World Health Organization came and said, what can we do about this? Because it isn't just anxiety, depression, everything goes to hell. The relationships go to hell. They stop eating. What are you going to do? A guy named Mark van Omeren, who I believe is from the Netherlands, right? Who is the head of mental health at the World Health Organization, about 8-9 years ago, called me up and I said, of course we can help. Put psychological flexibility into the hearts and minds of these folks, and they will have a empowered place to walk through hell. Yeah. And maybe we can't stop the war, but maybe we can contain the damage. And they've now done 4 or 5 randomized trials, including mediation analyses. We know how it happens. It reduces mental health problems over a year by 50%. It has impact on people with existing mental health problems at the level of self-help in the developed world, and it works by psychological flexibility. And it's now there in 32 different languages. It's in the Ukraine right now. They've got 150 professionals putting it into the Ukraine right now from the World Health Organization. And it's the single most downloaded book in the entire World Health Organization. I admit I'm saying something that's prideful. I am proud of that. I feel like, okay, if I die tomorrow, I've done something worthwhile. But I'm proud of the community that did that. When they called, I didn't say, I'll write the book. I said, you call Russ Harris.
Yeah.
He's better than I am. And he wrote a brilliant little book you can get for free.
Yeah, it's on our app as well. We share it on our app. Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's great. And I think you see how close ACT comes to intuitive thinking, to what people feel themselves. And the way you're talking makes me think like, okay, maybe it's happiness, because we wanted to talk a little bit about happiness, but it's maybe also making a real connection, and then maybe also having a bit of fun, even if it's like a very difficult situation. I mean, I can't compare this, of course, to what we did, but when we started 15 months ago, we had one thing we agreed on. Okay, we're gonna find out if we're gonna do this, and we're gonna have as much fun as we can in the process. That's the main rule, and then we'll see. And then for me, that was, if you talk about happiness, for me, it's already okay now, because I've had such a great 15 months with you and with the whole team, and we've had so much fun, and we only spend money, we only spend like, so it on paper it just costs us like a lot, but in value terms of values and happiness, and I mean, it brought us so much, because yeah, I think we really had we really focused on fun and making a connection, and the love we could then.
There's
put in
some
this
really good
project.
questions in the chat stream, and they
Yeah.
bear on this. You know, I think love and loss is one thing, not two. I mean, if you ever love anything a lot, you also know it'll pass away. That was what I was saying. You know, life is, there's a finitude to life, and we have the cognitive ability to be aware of that. And if you just run from that, you're doing something that's not loving to yourself. Yeah. So finding a place to hold pain, which is not optional, in a way that reduces suffering, which is optional, is a loving thing to do to yourself and bring into the lives of others. And so that was the earlier answer, but then the specifics, well, what about dementia care? Somebody asked. Of course. Right? You know, and there's good data on that with aging and so forth. Aging done well, you're gonna, and I can tell you this as a 74-year-old who's going to turn 75 in just a month or so.
Did you just tell your age?
Yes, I did. You're going to have to learn how to let go of things. Like my brother died 6 months ago and 14 days. So it's actually in my head how long. Yeah, not even 14. Oh my goodness, wait a minute. It's 7 months ago on this day. My brother died at 77 years old.
Is that 7 months already?
It's 7 months already. Yeah, because we just had his 6-month celebration. We had an awesome thing. But
I remember
my point being, love and loss is one thing, not two. And you know, he was such a vibrant guy. He was like, you know, he did a 250-mile bike ride in Italy just a month before he died, and then walked into a hospital with a bellyache. Turned out he had massively metastasized cancer, and less than a day later he was dead. And I was there with my hand on him when he took his last breath. But my point being, dementia, you know, as you lose function, is built into everybody's lives I'm talking about through illness or injury. And some of you have chronic pain. Some of you know about this up close. But if not, you're going to age. And as you age, you're going to start losing things. You're going to at least lose your friends. They're going to die. You're going to lose some of your function. What predicts a really powerful process? It's being able to shift.
Yeah.
You know, there's some major aging researchers in the ACT community. Sue Melanson McCurry, for example, at the University of Washington. And what predicts being able to do that well is you say, okay, well, I'm not going to be able to do that this way. I'm going to have those values put in my life this way. If you can do that, you can age really, really well. I tell the story of an early client who was in what was called the iron lung. They still call it that, but literally lived in a machine because she couldn't breathe without it, who had been a dancer. And her shift was realizing she could raise money for young people's dance troops. And she did. She could do it from an iron lung. So, dementia, aging, absolutely. And these comments that are being made, so you mean that there's something loving inside even pain and stuff? Absolutely. When you look inside pain, there's a possibility there that opens you up and softens you and helps you connect to the pain of others. Isn't that a loving thing? Of course it is. If you allow your own pain to soften you, there's some questions about, well, then what would you do with a dementia client stuff? I think we'll get into specifics if we do that. But I'll just say, look at what's out there in the ACT work, and you're going to see empowering people to take care of family members who have dementia, to deal with the early stages of dementia. That's just one example. Really good evidence of psychological flexibility is helpful.
Yeah, and I think the whole theme, I think, is the same anyway, because it's finding lightness in the dark. I think because people often say that ACT as a dark vision, and you can look at it that way, but I find it like it's like within our pain we find our values, that what you always said, but within our pain we can find the ability to do things with pain and to transform pain. And so I think that's really,
when reporters write about ACT, the big Time story that was my 5 minutes of fame, it said happiness is not normal. I've never said that in my life. When it was written up in Psychotherapy Networker, which is a big magazine for psychotherapists here in the US, the title was Hello Darkness. I've never said that either. So this is the being open to your own experience, which includes pain, when written about by reporters, means you're doomed to suffer or something. The reporters did a better job of the story when you talk to them, but when they're writing the little titles, they end up writing things that are outright lies. It's not hello darkness. It's not happiness is not normal. It's that our cartoon version of happy, happy, joy, joy as a model of a life well lived is killing our children. It's suffocating us all. It's unwise. There isn't an artist or a great novel or a wonderful painting or who would ever say anything like that. It's only sometimes the therapists, God help us, and the media that say shit like that. So can we wise up? Can we put out a message that's more, that is kinder and gives people a place to go with what's hard, other than there's something wrong with me?
I like the difference between chosen purpose and chasing feelings.
Yeah, when we were able to make that shift, you don't open up to feelings as the end all and be all.
I want to be happy all the time.
In there, you'll learn things, and happiness meaning living a values-based life. The Greeks called it eudaimonia. You can absolutely have that. You can have that be at the very essence of what you do. But if you think that means, a smile that looks like a rictus out of Joker and Batman, or a smiley face button that you put on the bottom of your emails, grow up. And don't tell your kids that's what happiness is, because it's a very unloving thing to tell your kids. It's not real. They will never have happiness like that. You didn't either.
Yeah. And
who the hell would want it? Have you ever been around somebody who, no matter what is happening to, they say, well, look at the bright side. You don't want to be, you want to slap them. Look at the bright side. My brother died.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, as I open up to that, I don't just weep at the loss, I weep with an appreciation for how wonderful he was. Yeah. Yes, there is a bright side to that loss, because it reminds you of love but let's be wiser.
Yeah. Steve, we don't have a lot of time. We have a lot of questions, I think. So,
Yeah.
But I do want to talk about Mindgrapher.
Yeah.
I would want to talk about PBT, but it should be, time-wise. I don't. What do you want to do? Because the Mindgrapher thing is like.
Let me just say, okay, can I do a 2-minute rant?
Yeah.
I'll
Go.
lie. It'll be 3 or 4 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. Go
On Mindgrapher, okay, do it by the clock. On Mindgrapher and PBT, here's the really, really exciting message that's in there, is that we now have the technology to reach into our clients' lives in the 167, am I doing the math right, hours other than the 1 hour you see them a week, if that's what you're doing, as to what is going on in their lives, asking the questions that are important. It's not the grit and the grain of the details, it's the processes of change. How do you know that? Because they've been vetted as predicting long-term outcomes. That means they're the proximal evidence of progress, the closest evidence of progress. It's not the long-term outcome, that's long-term. It's not the signs and symptoms, that's a misread. It's the how open or closed, how mindful or mindless, how values gauged or not. You can ask those questions. And you can have your client report them once a day, twice a day, 3 times a day, depends on how fast you go. And by the time you get 30 data points or something, and especially you get to about 60, which take only a month if it was twice a day, you can now apply statistics to that one individual and come back with a very reliable, statistically significant answer that, you know, what lifts you up is this, and what pushes you down is that. And the reason why your life is hard right now is because you're doing a little loop. You're doing something that looks good, doesn't live well, short-term gain, long-term pain, and it leads to this, and it leads to that, and then it produces this thing you're calling depression. But that's just your kind. You know, major depression, huge, I don't get charged for these seconds. Major depression, huge randomized trial, one of the last ones that'll ever be done. 3,700 people with major depression, 1,100 different combinations of signs and symptoms out of 3,700. Almost half with a combination that only 1/100% of the population shared.
Yeah.
That's not diagnostic, that's system, that's bullshit. And we're shoving people into categories that are ill-fitting categories. If you can model their lives, you need data. You don't do it by comparing them to others first. You look at what is empowering within their life. And that's what Mindgrapher does. The tools that are coming, when it first comes out, it'll just model a process and outcome and give you a crude correlation. We already had a discussion with Rob about how we'll upgrade it pretty soon to be able to say which of the processes are most important using machine learning algorithms, AI essentially within the life of the, and then down a few months, create a network like what's in that Learning PBT book, if you've ever looked at that, that will show how things accelerate in a negative way and how we can get them accelerating in a positive way. To me, that's a diagnostic system worth yearning for, because it tells you what to do. It's based on the individual. And we'll see if it gives us better outcomes. We have the randomized trials coming that will test that part. But that's what Mindgrapher does.
I actually
was client's life, get a report back about what's happening there. And then you'll be able to target it from these psychological flexibility tools, you know, as an ACT person.
I actually was, that was way within the 3 minute. It was very good. Yeah. So when we talked about Cyclex, like the US version of our app, I was excited. But when you started talking about Mindgrapher and could we do that as well together, then I literally stopped sleeping, because it's such a huge and cool project. And I think yeah, can we call it the DSM killer, right?
That's my dream.
Yeah,
that's the wooden stake through the vampire heart of the DSM.
Yeah, so we can call it the DSM killer. So we're building a DSM killer, and I think it's so cool because it's about asking the right questions, right? It's not about putting labels on people. It's asking the right questions, and then you get, okay, what are the right questions to ask for the therapist? What are the right processes? You can really, use in therapy. And also, and that's the link to PsychFlex and that guide, what's the technology, what are the exercises you can use for this particular client, for this particular process with those particular questions. So yeah, it's coming to our country as well. We're probably gonna make a Dutch version of it as well. And the more data we collect, because that's the whole point, the more data we collect, the better the data becomes, and the better the algorithm becomes, and the better the more reliable it becomes. So that's, for me, that's even bigger than the whole, I mean, yeah, this is just a hello and a webinar just to say hello to our group and our great community. And we can answer some questions now, I think. But yeah, we're gonna have English content, but the most important thing is, I think we're really heading in a way where we can do a new form of psychology and become part of history. And I hope a history with a lot of compassion and hope for everybody. So thrilled to be part of this.
It's going to be an exciting journey. And finally, we'll be able to put in what's probably in your clinical work anyway, which is that you apply methods that seem to fit the needs of the individuals in front of you.
Yeah.
You have a science out there saying, no, don't do that. Apply this whole big protocol to this category that we put atop this person. And most clinicians in their practice say by their behavior, I'm not going to do that.
Intuitively, yeah.
Unless they're being supervised and somebody's making them do it.
Yeah.
Because why wouldn't you mix and match to fit? So let's say somebody really is really clear and in a way that really fits the ACT model on their values, but boy, do they get wrapped around emotional avoidance. You're not going to be spending session after session. You're going to use that strength to target, see what happens when you're emotionally avoidant. You actually start violating your values. You're going to use it, right?
Yeah.
We'd all do that. Well, then why couldn't we have a data collection, analytic system, and categorical kind of diagnostic system that has that same quality of, let's get the glasses that allow us to see the individual instead of the norm being what's real, and human beings are error terms.
Right.
We have what we're doing with the statistics in MindGrapher is upside down. The individual's locked down, the group is the source of error. The group meaning the collective. In the statistics we're developing, you look to see, is this person like another person? If that helps you see them even more clearly, great. If you have to fuzz them to make them fit into the category, no. We just have to say enough is enough.
And maybe it's also good to mention that it's not exclusively for ACT, that the model can be built for cognitive therapy, that can be built for all therapies. And that's what I love about the PPT book, that you're opening up the ACT community for a broader vision where everybody who wants to play is welcome if they can prove that the right processes work. Yeah, why not? So I hope.
One of the things you've probably seen it, and I could put a link in the chat box, is that when you look at all the mediators of change that are out there, psychological flexibility does really well. If you put it into this broader perspective that says in process-based therapy of healthy variation, selection, retention, fitted to context across these psychological dimensions, and then, yes, of course, the social and the biophysiological levels. If you do that, basically we have agreement about what the most important processes are, and psychological flexibility is right there at the center. That's why we called the app PsychFlex, even though it's beyond ACT.
Yeah.
But it's because it captures most of what we know about processes of change. And so we don't have anything to fear as an ACT community any more than, let's say, the behavior analysts have to fear that reinforcement's going to go away.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen, because we've spent too much time developing precision about processes. Get the other processes in here and let's see.
Yeah.
Let's see. And let's use what's best and serve our clients. We're not here to be right. We're here to be servants.
Yeah.
And so I'm not worried about it. And if that means the death of act as a specific thing, well, I've always said act is anything that targets and is held accountable to increasing the psychological flexibility of clients.
Yeah.
I said that 20 years ago. It's not a technology, it's a model. And the techniques you can create yourself. I bet you most of the people I'm talking to have done that. You've made stuff up in sessions. Well, it's still evidence-based because you're targeting an evidence-based process. Let's put that on steroids and save the entire world community. You got processes there, attachment, I don't know, respect, self-compassion. Great.
Yeah. Come
on in. Let's find what's best. And to me, if the model is psychological flexibility, you can call it ACT, but you don't have to. You want to, maybe eventually it's evidence-based therapy.
Yeah.
Would I weep over that? Would we be losing anything as an ACT community over that?
No. Nothing.
Yeah,
but it takes balls to do that when you're 74, man. So well done. And yeah, that's really, you could have stayed with ACT and just celebrated all your success, but you always want to go further. You always want to have a broader vision. So that's why we're here now. So thank you so much.
Can I say, I just came last night, I came across the document where we first created recognized trainers in ACBS. ACBS was just forming. And in that document, I'll send it out today on the listserv if you're an ACBSer. It has page after page after page of saying basically, it's not ACT or the technology or the name that matters. It's the processes that matter and putting them into people's lives. And having an open scientific and professional community is the way to do that. And so we want to be Linux, not Microsoft. And we're going to figure out a way to we're doing it with the World Health Organization and so forth, to put these processes into the human culture. And everyone will do fine if we do that. We don't need to worry and get clingy. Oh, you're going to take ACT away. We're not going to take ACT away. Nope.
There's a lot of positive changes coming, and diagnostically as well as therapeutically. But yeah, the core is it's probably gonna survive. Yeah. Barry, did you have some questions for?
Oh yeah,
Mr. Hayes.
No, Steve already answered a few questions. Let me look on my list. Do you recommend some good book or authors about process-based therapy? So I see a book on your back. Beside that, other books, maybe. That's the question.
Yeah, that's a good one.
This is a good one. Yeah, it's probably the only one yet, right?
Yes, it is directly on. Well, there's one for CBT folks that kind of goes through some of the things, and there's one called Beyond the DSM that is more an edited book talking about the intellectual side of it. This is the most practical one out. And there are online courses and things like that. And I have one that is called Act in Practice, that for experienced ACT people can be good. It's over at Praxis. COI warning, I make more money if you buy those things.
Praxis set, right? Praxisset.com.
Yeah, Praxis Continuing Education and Training, so CET.
Do you put it in the chat, guys?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect, yes.
But the process-based therapy journey is the sort of meta ACT journey. We are the pilot test. And why? It's because we're come out of the functional analytic tradition. That's where we came from. Gijs knows why, because he was trained that way.
Yeah.
And many of you were trained that way.
Yeah.
I know that because I know some of your mentors. But now it's time to really put that into the healthcare system. And, when we put it in there, we'll be able to do it. So it's not just mental health, but it's behavioral health, but it's not just that, it's social wellness. And so it's not by accident, you know, that community has people actively working on climate change or on, you know, stigma and prejudice or immigration or economic disparities or.
Yeah, it's everywhere. Yeah.
Thank you. Then Vera asked, you said something about podcasts. Can we find it somewhere? I think it's on stephenchayes.com. Is that correct?
I missed the word, but
Okay,
Stephen,
the
if you want to
podcast.
follow me, absolutely is wonderful. If you just go to www.stephenchayes.com and click on yes, please send it to me, then you're in my system. It's a one-click opt-out if you ever irritate you.
But can you find the podcasts, like the audios, on stephenchayes.com? I think.
Oh, yeah. Well, the different podcasts I've done over the last few years are right there. There's a list and a link for almost every one of them.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I'm doing a kind of a newsletter called Days Are Getting Better. It's a video newsletter. If you get on my list, and I'm also doing something that will be in PsychFlex of little 1-minute moments of bumps and nudges that are just 1 minute long. Something you can share. So that's all part of the stuff I'm doing too.
Yeah, we're constantly creating new stuff. I mean, it's. Yeah.
Then,
Well, I haven't had this conversation with Gijs yet, but I just.
Well, what now?
A few minutes earlier, I was talking to Spencer, who's part of the praxis team. I was saying that the program I want to do in PsychFlex is nothing but 1-minute moments. So you'll be able to go in and have with every act process the old.
So you want the program? Yeah, cool.
One minute is boom, 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 stuff you can ask even young people that have the attention span for 1 minute.
Let's do it.